not as many people listen to this as listen to like drama streamers, but there's people listening. We're up to 35,000 subscribers now. Hey, that's respectable as like a small, medium channel. It's not just nothing, is the point. There are people actually listening. We can definitely do that kind of studying and discussion online. And I think also we need to stay active in local organizing while also starting to knit together the anti-revisionist Marxist networks that will form the vanguard party of tomorrow. So, spoiler, I do not see a party currently that I think is clearly the vanguard party that everybody should go join. So, not having a satisfactory out-of-the-box solution, what do? Well, let's continue my response. I believe that for now, if less experienced comrades are going to be in organizations with elements of liberalism, which to me is all of the communist parties, it's better and safer that that liberalism is openly understood to be such, rather than dressing it up. And remember, I'm talking about less experienced comrades here, which is a lot of people. It's safer to have whatever liberalism is out there openly understood to be such, rather than dressing it up as Marxism-Leninism, which is what the revisionist parties do. And others may disagree with that, but that is my honest view. And I've been saying this for several years now with that exact reasoning, is I've been pointing people, and there's a couple of different reasons for this. It's not just that there's not a clear vanguard party. Well, there's a couple of different reasons we'll discuss in just a minute for that. Part of it is I'm running a YouTube channel that I'm hoping to make as useful to the most amount of people I can possibly make it useful to, while actually sticking to Marxist unity, and having that specific focus. I had originally tried to have the channel be more of a left unity thing. The anarchists quickly showed that was not going to be possible, and so because my inclination was more toward Marxism-Leninism, that's what I said. It was anarchists or nothing, and so we got rid of the anarchists. Running a channel that is trying to provide public-facing resources that are going to be useful to lots and lots of people. I don't want to steer people into some niche group that blows up 6 months later, and a lot of people get hurt in the process. I'd rather just see people get active, because I think a lot of people are terminally online now more than ever. People are addicted to their phones and not doing enough in person, which, again, when I got active, you didn't really have there wasn't that much going on online, so you kind of had to go to stuff in person and actually talk to people. Now there's this added danger of people just getting caught up in terminally online things, and I don't want to encourage that. I want to encourage people, go get involved in things in your community, meet people in person, find out about projects that aren't advertised online, and just increase the general level of struggle. And then meanwhile, while you're in your groups, which in the United States are almost undoubtedly not going to be Marxist-Leninist, but you need to be active in what is there. Also do your online studying, have your discussion groups. If you can form like a faction or something within, among comrades that you meet in a real life, in-person organization who are also interested in Marxism, and you get a little study group going, great, do that. I would totally encourage that. I don't think we have critical mass at this point for there to be a huge communist movement, let alone one with deep roots to the labor movement. I mean, there kind of isn't a major labor movement in the first place. So we're at a really preliminary stage, and I think that people outside the U.S. in particular really don't understand that. I mentioned this before. I had a patron who previously was supporting the $20 level, dropped down to the $2 level over disagreement, because I said I would rather see people just engage in kind of big tent mass party stuff while studying, obviously, Marxism-Leninism in their spare time, like online or with a small group of people. But there aren't large Marxist-Leninist groups engaged in mass activity at this point. I would rather see people engage in some kind of just general mass action and study Marxism-Leninism on the side until all those people studying that at some point in the future, form some kind of a new network which doesn't exist currently, then having yet another pre-party formation spring up, have another group of 10 assholes, half of whom are going to turn out to be Nazis a year from now, declare themselves some new vanguard group, and waste everybody's time, including their own. I don't see the point in that. So I was saying, like, I feel like we need more mass activity and more general labor struggle, which in part is just, we need the average American worker more interested in standing up for themselves rather than rolling over. And that's a deep-rooted problem. That's like a cultural problem. There's all kinds of things we are waiting on and trying to see changed there. But I think at this point, just seeing the overall level of mass activity is just too fucking low. And having another group declare themselves the vanguard is going to make a fucking difference. And also the last few groups that did that, like PCUSA, like ACP, like a lot of these groups sprouting up, they're like deeply revisionist, to say the least. So I don't see really the point in that. And I think that there's got to be more overall activity to get the class consciousness up and just get the spirit of resistance up before anything useful is going to come out of that. Now, obviously, I'm trying to put highly digestible Marxist-Leninist materials in people's hands to help that new, underground network of people studying this stuff to materialize. That's what I would like to see more than anything else. But like I said, it seems to me, I got into an argument with somebody else on social media who, again, was not American. And I think you just don't understand how bad it is here. It's really, really bad. Like, the level of class consciousness is lower, I think, than you could possibly imagine. And it seems to me like some of the people who've gotten the most angry or, like, are the most confused about the situation in the U.S. are people who aren't here. And I get that. The U.S. is kind of unfathomably awful in its backwardness in this way. But there are people who are trying to get it, and I'm doing everything that I can do, as a random individual to try to do this. And I don't see a group that impresses me enough at this point to get involved with. But more on that in a minute. Anyway, we've gone over this so many times, and I'm just trying to make it as clear as I can. I thought I made it very, very clear in the last video, the Bernie Sanders one. All of it, the Green Party, everything. Bernie Sanders took the Green Party's platform. And it's like, that people in the U.S. left and beyond, even people who think of themselves as left, support a lot of that stuff. But they're not fighting for it. And that's like kind of the key difference is Americans are not in general fighting. And this isn't just to slam the U.S. as like so weak, so useless, whatever. It's a problem we have to deal with and have to address and just keep getting at. There's a way to change it is what I'm trying to say. I don't think we found it yet. I know a lot of people point to the settler nation of the U.S. as in part a reason for that. I think that while the U.S. and Israel, for example, have a lot in common in terms of the overall history and nature of being a settler colonial country, I think the U.S. has been so established for so long. Is it a factor? Yes. It's not a sort of life and death struggle for the existence of the colony as it is in Israel. So I think some of those comparisons are off in that way. In other words, I think that does explain some things about the U.S.'s mindset and the cultural roots of the preservation of the status quo here. I don't think it explains everything about it, but anyway, some people very confident on that point. Let's continue with the comments. Somebody said, to those of us too uneducated to really know who's a crank, your endorsement of the Greens, despite being a communist, really goes a long way to proving your sincerity and thoughtfulness. And I respond to this by saying, to be clear, I think that something like the Green Party, or DSA, that kind of mass left thing, is more of an inevitability than something I positively want to endorse or promote. In other words, I think regardless of what some random YouTuber is doing, I think you would expect to see struggle because conditions are bad.
We're going to start the meditation now. And we'll continue listening to that afterwards. And then we'll do yoga and martial arts.
This is a guided meditation on peace, presentness, and political revolution. Find a place where you can sit comfortably, perhaps resting your hands on your knees. You may wish to sit on the floor with your legs crossed, or if you're not too tired, you may like to lie down on your back. Whatever position suits you. Make sure that your chest is open, and you may wish to allow your eyes to gently close, or find a point in the room where you can rest your focus. Begin by noticing your breathing. Feel your chest rising and falling, your belly expanding in and out. You don't have to change the way you breathe, just becoming aware of it. In and out. Notice also that society can be thought of as being made up of groups of people with conflicting and irreconcilable economic interests, which we call classes. You don't have to change society in this moment. This is your moment, your time. Just notice class conflict and be aware of it. This will be our anchor as we proceed on this journey. And now, let's take 3 deep, relaxing breaths. As you release the air in your lungs, you may wish to repeat in your mind the topics of today's meditation. And with each breath, I invite you to experience a doubling of your relaxation. Let's take the first of these 3 breaths. Now, breathing in, peace, and out. Very good. Breathing normally in between, becoming even more relaxed with each breath. Let's take the second breath. Now, in presentness and release. Fantastic job. Aware of your chest rising and falling. Let's take the third and final breath. Now, breathing in, political revolution, and out. Well done. Don't worry if your breathing doesn't match the sound of my voice. It is all good, and it is all okay. Just becoming even more aware of breath, and beginning slowly to relax. As we breathed those 3 relaxing breaths, you may have noticed a slight tingling sensation spreading from the top of your head down through your shoulders, arms, chest, right out the tips of your toes. This sensation is available to you throughout this meditation, whenever you desire. Don't be distressed or upset if you become distracted by thoughts or sounds in the room. Just keep coming back to breath. The world can be chaotic, and we can lose focus when we think about what we might like to change, or something we wish we could control. But just invite yourself to come back to breath and the model of class conflict. Breathing in and out. As you sink deeper and deeper into this relaxed state of awareness, you may begin to notice the position of your body, the surfaces you are in contact with, the temperature of the room, and you may also notice your body's position in the system of global capitalism. And the air continues to flow, becoming even more relaxed, even more aware. Now, in this relaxed state, we are ready to consider the revolution. As you breathe in and out, receive an invitation to the idea that revolution will look different for you if you are in a bourgeois nation enriched by global capitalism than it might for someone in a country impoverished by it. Returning always to breath and class conflict. When we think about revolution, we may imagine it as destructive or violent. We may conjure images of past revolutions that we think fell short, or make jokes about sending landlords and capitalists to violent ends. We may shy away from this image, whether because we are liberals rather than socialists, or because we were raised in liberal capitalist societies that maintain a hold on our thoughts, or perhaps out of compassion and love for our fellow human beings, whoever they may be. Whatever the reason, we may desire to avoid revolution, but simply agitate for reform within capitalist society while maintaining its comforts. But although revolution means a break with the old ways of doing things, it need not be fundamentally destructive, but instead an act of creation. It may be scary or painful, like bringing a new child into the world, but it is the birthing of a new way of life, rather than the gradual managing of decay and bargaining with entropy that liberal democracy has become. This is not to say that we cannot learn from our mistakes or come to an understanding of history. Simply that, in considering the revolution, we want our focus to be on the present, and not our anxieties about the past. Do not judge yourself if you have doubts. Simply observe them and let them go. We may become anxious or depressed when we ruminate on the past and witness the destruction and pain that can seem to surround us. We can be upset by the wickedness of others and wonder how it is that human beings can have done so many awful things to each other or the planet. Conversely, we may rejoice at small changes that we have managed to win in the past through elections and trade unions in the struggle for a fairer world. But the past is not real and exists only in our memories, in the present, where breath and class conflict remain, and where we want our focus to be. Breathing in, peace, and out. Each breath deepening your relaxation and your awareness. When we are not dwelling on the past, we often project our thoughts about revolution into the future, as if it will be some messianic event waiting just out of reach that will save us from the frightening things in our world. But the future also does not exist. It is only anticipation in the present moment. When we think of the revolution as a specific event, like an armed uprising that will take place in the future, we can become concerned about whether our actions take us closer to our idea of that event or farther away. We may become fixated on the purity of our vision, focusing only on the ideal, classless future, and neglecting other forms of oppression that others struggle against in the here and now. Or we may become anxious, thinking that it is an impossible task, or that we would have nothing to contribute, imagining instead that the future revolution will be led by anti-fascist catgirls or revolutionary daddies who will do the fighting for us. This can turn us against each other, or make us doubt ourselves, wondering whether what we or those around us are doing is truly revolutionary or merely reform. It is okay to have these doubts. Simply recognize them and return to the present moment, to breath, and the desire to abolish the class system. By noticing and letting go of doubts, and not judging ourselves or others for having them, we become prepared to take and wield power in the present, to neither retreat into ruminating on how we have been hurt in the past by the current political system, nor project our desire for change onto imaginary future heroes, but instead, in the present moment, to realize the energy inside of ourselves that we can use to lead the revolution. Now, breathing in, presentness, When we look at the revolution either as a distant project of the future or the redemption of the past, we often imagine it as a moral crusade, springing from the best impulses of our hearts, and someday bringing about a lasting justice. But this way of thinking can also bind us and stop us from seeing a way forward in the present. It is easy to become overwhelmed or disappointed when our own sense of justice is not met, and to become concerned with how the resources of our world are distributed, rather than the conditions under which they are extracted and produced. We stray from the present and class conflict, and it is easy to conflate our moral desire for a better world with the ideals of participation in bourgeois democracies in which we are raised. That is not to say that we must abandon our moral ideals or close our hearts to democratic participation or the suffering of others, or that our smaller efforts to make the world a better place are necessarily a misuse of our time. It is merely to appreciate that a revolution is more than a change in the distribution of goods, or a struggle to get a slightly fairer deal. It is the struggle to abolish the causes of that injustice, not merely its symptoms, which are fleeting and can flare up chaotically as long as class conflict persists. Breathing in, political revolution, and out, aware of your chest, your belly, that tingling sensation in your head, shoulders, chest, and down through your legs. You may become aware that you are holding tension in your neck, or your jaw, or cognitive tension brought about by trying to reconcile the internal contradictions of capitalism. With your next breath, just invite any tense muscles to let go. In a moment, we will count backwards from 5 and gradually return to our normal awareness. But first, take a moment to suspend yourself in this relaxed state, as if deep in an ocean. The waves sway overhead, but you are still and calm. And now we will begin to surface with 5 short phrases. You may wish to repeat them in your mind or out loud, whatever is best for you. Beginning with 5. I am aware of my breath. 4. I am aware of my body, becoming more aware with each breath. 3. I am This meditation was written and performed by Oliver Thorne and recorded with the help of Man Bros Media. Patreon.com/philosophytube is where you can support the show and find a list of the generous patrons who make it possible.
I think you would expect to see that. I think it's an inevitability something like that will pop up. Part of my curiosity is, why are we not getting some more durable form of that? It isn't just about healthcare. It's about a housing crisis. It's about so many things. And yet, some kind of a durable organization fighting for those things. Like, it is the Green Party platform. It is, again, DSA is an older organization, but had this upsurge recently, fighting, having a similar platform or statement of principles to fight for these things. And yet there's low engagement on that. People, it's kind of like if you've ever tried to unionize a workplace where people will spend all day complaining about the boss, but then when you propose like constructive steps to fight back, no one steps up. The US is kind of like that, but on like an entire countrywide level. Everybody, especially the progressives, they will complain, but they just won't take the fight any further than trying to support progressive Democrats in their primaries. And it's like, what is it going to take? That has been shown so many times not to work, but these people can't understand organizing for the sake of organizing to build a party and to build influence and to do projects that don't involve winning elections. They can't get past the "you can't win an election" thing. And so they don't understand why you just need to organize for the sake of organizing to pursue your interests outside of the electoral realm. And the whole thing is so just baby-brained. It's just on like a preschool level, politically speaking. But anyway, I think that something like the Greens or DSA, that mass left thing, is more of an inevitability than something I positively want to endorse or promote. I am a communist. I think that something like that's not going to go the distance, and we ideally would want communists steering something like that. So in a sense, the development of a vanguard party and the development of a mass party does go in tandem. But again, I think we have a situation now where we are having some success on this channel doing direct education. I'm not a party, it's just a YouTube channel. It used to be, if you really want to like study the works of Lenin, you had to join a party. Now you can tune into YouTube, and then I will tell you, go get involved in what's there. And so there may be a new route to it. I don't want to oversell the use of the internet here, but it seems to be working to a great extent. I see people having discussions about communism now I never saw 10 years ago. So I do think that that is accelerating, that's intensifying. And we want to keep that going. And I do think something's going to materialize out of that. Like, the quantitative change leads to a qualitative change eventually. I think something qualitatively new will emerge at some point, which is why I'm just encouraging the quantitative aspect at this point, because we don't even have like a sustained Sokdem party. When you don't even have that, what does it say about the overall level of struggle? And then people are like, what do you care about where Sokdem's organized? You're missing the point. It's that people are just laying down. That's the point, okay? That's the problem, is people are just laying down. I would like them to stand back up again. Then, through the struggle, we can convince them to organize our way as communists. But if they're laying down, that's the worst kind of position they can be in, and that's where a lot of Americans are. So you may not understand, please, you're invited to spend some time in the United States. Wouldn't actually recommend it, but if you want to understand, come here, check it out. It fucking sucks beyond your wildest imagination. Anyway, what I do endorse is people taking next steps in organizing, keeping this process rolling along. And if somebody's kind of more like in a DSA, green, not Marxist-Leninist headspace, and they're not even organizing, toward those ends, I would encourage them to at least do that. We all start somewhere. You know what I mean? You don't necessarily pop out a communist. Some of us do. Great. But not everybody does. But to say that there's not communist, at least future allies in the Green Party, there's not future communist allies in DSA, I think is just wildly short-sighted and inaccurate. There's at a minimum, there's future communists in the Green Party. There's future communists. There's current communists in the Green Party and in DSA. That there's nothing else going on around them. So that's what they're involved in today. We do want to build networks for tomorrow, which are going to be explicitly communist and, you know, have an actual vanguard party. We need a labor movement as well. But what I'm talking about is keeping this process rolling along. Whatever step you're on, take the next step as soon as you're ready to take it, you know? And that's the cause for concern for me, is that so many people will support a Bernie Sanders type platform, which again was stolen from the Greens and then slightly watered down. Yet where is the sustained struggle for that? It's all being channeled into the Democratic Party where nothing can happen. There's no internal democracy. That party is run by the 1%. It's all just a big, it's just to mess with you. It's to mislead you. So, like I said, what I do endorse is people taking next steps in organizing. If your next step is to become a communist, excellent. We're here for it. Why do you think we started this channel? Why do you think we're doing these readings? Why do you think we're trying to foster that? Why do you think we're trying to help you connect with other people like that? Of course, that's what we want to see. But the concerning thing is the refusal to engage in something even like basic organizing that's not even the kind of democratic centralism we would ultimately need to see. And that it may take an experience in a non-DemCent organization to like realize why you need that. You know, the refusal to engage in something like that, even though many agree with its platform, I think is a hugely concerning failure. So yeah, if that's what's going on in your area, do it. And just take this thing, we got to keep building, we got to keep it moving towards the thing we need to get to, and we're really far from that. But as the saying goes, journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And we got to keep it moving. So many people are giving up and laying down before they ever really try. That is the focus. And I'm glad that you spend your whole day like reading, you know, just you get up, it's 10 hours of like the most cutting edge Maoist texts. Congrats. What do you want, a fucking parade? Most people are not doing that, but we're trying to change the culture to get people to even understand what the fuck is dialectical materialism. You know, it takes time. It takes time for the word to spread, for it to catch on, for people's minds to change, for people to learn it. It takes a while to incorporate that. And then for people to get a good opportunity to get hooked up with some kind of organizing and to participate in an action and things like that, it takes time. We want it to move as fast as possible, but yeah, I mean, what do you think we're doing here? So anyway, I was going to call this section a tale of two comments because, so we have on the one hand, and this comment on the screen I would not count as one of the two, but that first comment, and I'll just put it back up for the sake of because I'm talking about it. We have on the one hand people saying, I joined CPUSA. They told me to like be a Democrat, basically. Now let's look at the other comment. Because obviously that was an unsatisfying experience for that person, right? That's the problem. I don't want to recommend that. I don't want to recommend people go do that. Because then they're going to come back and they'll be like, you're a shill for the Democratic Party. Well, I don't want that. Again, as I've said, it's not really for me to decide where people have a best fit. What I have been telling people is, if all that's going on is DSA or the Greens, at least do that and meet who you can there, and obviously keep studying communism on the side. That's why do you think we keep putting the videos out? Anyway, here's the other comment in the tale of two comments. I think that advocating for people to go spin their wheels in a non-revolutionary party like Green Party or DSA is a fundamental misunderstanding of Marxism-Leninism. I'm still very confused by your stance on this and have been for a while. I'd rather see people in literally any key phrase, literally any Marxist-Leninist party. Now, I guess this raises a lot of questions about what makes a Marxist-Leninist party. Like, you have to adhere to certain policies and practices and a basic outlook that a lot of the parties don't. At which point they're calling themselves Marxist-Leninist, but are they? This goes back to what I said before about, I think that if you're doing liberalism, better not to call it Marxism-Leninism. That's confusing, especially to newer comrades. So my philosophy, and you might disagree, but my philosophy, and it's genuine and sincere, is I think that that may do more harm than good for a lot of people. And at a minimum, what I keep hearing about CPUSA in particular, which is like the Communist Party of the United States. It was, the old Comintern Party. It's supposed to be the official party. There's, of course, a lot more now, but it's supposed to be the official party. And what I keep hearing is people get involved for a year or two, and then they finally just can't take it anymore, but it's always the same problems that lead them to quit. They're not doing Marxism-Leninism. They're opportunists, they're liberals, and it sucks. That's what I keep hearing from people. So, I'd rather see people in literally any Marxist-Leninist party, they said. They continue. People will not even get political education nor political maturity out of them, meaning the, quote, non-revolutionary parties, as there is little study or struggle. See, that's not true. When I was involved with the Green Party, granted this was a different decade, but I mean, at that time, the Green Party that I was involved with, if there was some action going on in the area, the Green Party was there every single time. All the anti-war stuff was really big then. Green Party was on top of it, had a presence at every single rally. And as I said in one of the videos, I went to meetings that helped plan some of the anti-war protests. Like, it's just not true to say that there's no struggle there. They're involved in a lot of different campaigns. I saw that firsthand. DSA, today, which I have been a dues-paying member of DSA on and off in recent years, and I've contributed to some of their local campaigns in a support capacity. They've been involved, they've been leading the struggle. They've been like actually in the area I'm thinking of, the Green Party has a much less significant presence. Again, kind of died out around the time of Occupy. DSA took over in 2016 because there was a huge Bernie contingent. And DSA has since been launching all kinds of initiatives. So they've actually been on the forefront of, if there's an event happening, chances are DSA initiated that event. So that's just wrong to say that there's no struggle going on. And as far as the study, there may not be study going on within the party, but like I say, we're doing study here online, and I'm talking to a lot of people who are active in their local groups, and I've heard from dozens of people that they have started a discussion group among the left, most left-leaning people in their local branch of whatever organization they're in. So tell me how that's harmful, or if not harmful, I mean, isn't that the thing we should be doing right now? Well, they say it is very much a waste of people's time, especially the type of people who watch this channel. So what should you be doing? Again, they say literally any Marxist-Leninist party. Let me tell you this, the amount of communists I have met in real life, very few, very few. So if you were really just leaving it up to those parties, I mean, well, we'll leave that there for now. Greens are not reds. I've met plenty of Greens who are, actually, but okay. And DSA wastes their time on localized electoralism and debating their own mal or unformed line. Well, so they don't have a line, but they're debating it. Okay. Localized electoralism. Yeah, they do that. And again, the right wing of DSA is going to be more inclined to be opportunist toward the Democratic Party. You can go back to the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. Point being, even in that party, you had a left and a right wing. You had different factions. And they fight with each other. And people switch sides within that. Expecting there not to be like a relative left and a right wing with where we're at in the United States right now within these organizations, I think is foolish. Dare I say ultra-leftist even. Because how do you think we're going to get from where we are now to where we need to be? Okay, I'll be the first to admit we're not where we need to be. How do we get there? I've given a lot of thought to that. And I'm not saying I have definitely the correct answer. I look forward to the chat after this discussion because I think it is a discussion we need to have. And I would like to help, promote the best ideas we can come up with. I don't want to use this channel to promote wrong ideas, honestly. But like I said, this is the best that I can come up with, and I'm totally unswayed by comments like this. And this person is a supporter of the channel, and I appreciate that support. And they didn't get into a long back and forth with me about this, so hopefully they saw the value of my response. But I mean, a lot of the stuff in here is just incorrect. So you're getting wrong ideas about what's going on in these organizations in the first place. And then you're getting, you're making then wrong conclusions, like logical extrapolations of what that means. So, yeah, anyway. Case in point, DSA's stance on Palestine. What are you even talking about? So I went and double checked. Here's the statement that DSA made about Palestine. Democratic Socialists of America, DSAUSA.org. Statements. End the violence and the occupation, free Palestine, October 7, 2023. DSA is steadfast in expressing our solidarity with Palestine. Today's events, this was the beginning of the current situation, are a direct result of Israel's apartheid regime, a regime that receives billions in funding from the United States. End the violence, end the occupation, free Palestine. We unequivocally condemn the killing of all civilians. So they have that. You want to criticize that? Fine. You think that there hasn't been ongoing internal struggle over that? You don't know what's going on in DSA. Please don't comment on things that you don't know about. Anyway, it is imperative for international human rights law to be respected. We cannot forget that the Israeli state has systematically denied Palestinians the right to self-determination for decades. This was not unprovoked, the attack. For over 60 years, Palestinians have faced ethnic cleansing, torture, bombings, and housing demolitions. Gaza is still under a blockade. As socialists, we must act. New York City DSA's Not on Our Dime campaign, led by DSA member and New York Assembly member Zoran Mamdoni, provides an effective model for pressuring elected officials to stop providing financial support to the Israeli state. Take to the streets to join a protest for peace and against funding the Israeli state. Find out what actions local DSA and YDSA chapters are taking and join it. So there's a little bit of liberalism in there, but overall, would you expect any better from any left organization in the US given the current situation right now? I think for the general state of the US left, that's a very good statement. Let's look also at the DSA's International Committee. They have the Palestine Solidarity Toolkit, and there's a lot of resources below the screenshot, but it says take action for Palestine, messaging tips, this is genocide, raise the alarm, is directly funded and rubber stamped by the US government with $3.8 billion a year in military funding to Israel. Now Biden is promising to send more weapons and military funding. Demand we must stop arming Israel. Be very clear about actors who the aggressor is, Israel, and who the oppressed is, Palestinians. Do not use passive voice. Warn audiences to be vigilant about rampant Israeli state propaganda and racist, dehumanizing disinformation. The root of violence is Israel's 75 plus years of violent colonialism and mass killings of the Palestinian people. And it goes on. You think that's like a terrible line? I don't. Honestly, I thought Paul Sturm's line was worse. So I think that that was an uninformed comment. Anyway, so I wound up a couple days ago making a post about this. Join a U.S. Communist Party. Here are your options. 1, Trotskyites with no ties to the labor movement. 2, opportunists who tell you to vote Democrat with no ties to the labor movement. 3, Chinese social imperialists with no ties to the labor movement. Or 4, Brezhnevites with no ties to the labor movement. Also, there isn't actually a labor movement. Have fun. I mean, it's daunting. That's the point here. That's the joke. Is like, I think we need a reboot. I think we need to do this thing over. That's why I'm taking the strategy that I am, is doing direct education, public-facing education, and then telling people get organized, find each other, and rebuild a vanguard network that can actually has roots in the existing left and labor movement that can lift this thing up. And I think it's going to take time. I think it's in the process of being built. Somebody responded by saying there definitely is a labor movement, but it's small and fragile, operates largely unseen, and a lot of people and organizations exist to take credit for it or act as a black hole, sucking up any resources meant for shop floor level organizing. I just said, well, this is what I'm talking about. And there's a chart of the union density rate for Australia, New Zealand, UK, and USA. The USA starts at 1960, about 30% of the workforce was unionized. That's down to like 10% today. It's just been in steady decline ever since the 1960s. So with 10% unionization now, which is like an 80-year low, there may be popular sentiment for unions has been rising in recent years. Like more people are supportive of the idea of a union, but actual unions have not caught up yet. The actual rate of union representation is very low still. So that's where we are. How do we take where we are and take it to the next step and the next step and the next step in the process of building power? How do we build that power? All right. So let's look at some of the options. I'm just saying it's a difficult situation. We have our strategy for it that I've been talking about, and I'm seeing some difference here from doing that. But let's take a look. There was a link somebody sent, actually off of, I think it was this Blue Sky post. Somebody sent this tier maker thing. You can see the various logos of U.S. socialist parties or organizations down at the bottom there. And so I put this together. Now, I didn't do I really need to preface this. This is not an actual tier list like, the ones higher up are better. That's not the point of this. I separated them out into groups because this is actually a pretty good tool for doing that. Let's take a look. I'll bring this up now. And we'll discuss the options. Again, going back to in the tale of two comments, I'd rather see people in any Marxist-Leninist group. There it is. Any Marxist-Leninist party. Literally any Marxist-Leninist party. And I responded to that by saying, no matter how shitty, no matter how revisionist, no matter how actually non-Marxist-Leninist the party is, despite claiming to be, we have a difference there. Okay? And I'm telling you now, it's a sincere difference. I, at this time, don't think that that's better than me doing public-facing education, telling people to get involved, find each other, and build new networks. Because, and there was another argument I got into on Blue Sky with, again, somebody from outside the U.S. I don't think this commenter, the one on the screen, is outside the U.S., but there's somebody else who's super irate about anything having to do with this. And they said, your main task is to reconstitute the Communist Party in your country. And my response to that is, which one? Because there's a lot. Now, if you are talking about reconstituting, just not a party in particular, but try to help bring about the reformation of an actually Marxist-Leninist vanguard group, that's exactly what I'm trying to do via public-facing education and encouraging people to get involved and find each other in real life. Okay, that's literally exactly what I'm trying to do, is contribute to the conditions necessary for the reconstitution of a communist vanguard. If we're talking, on the other hand, about reconstituting a particular party, how do you pick which one? Because there's so many, and let's go through them. So like I said, this is not an actual tier list. That's why I've blanked out the A through F along the side. The one I did leave is, I don't know what this is, because I guess starting there, I don't know what that is. It says Edward, I think. Is that like a Bernsteinian party? Because Edward Bernstein, I mean, that's the spelling of his name. I don't even know what that is. I've never seen that before. But anyway, the first row, I put kind of more like what we would call like mass or not specifically communist groups. You have DSA, Green Party US, Peace and Freedom Party, and SPUSA, Socialist Party USA. So those are not specifically communist parties. They exist. They're there. The next group, I put anti-revisionist parties. The ACB, which no longer exists because the NASBAL PCUSA sued them out of existence. And then there's the American Party of Labor, which is an anti-revisionist party. They have a Hojaist type line rather than a Maoist type line. I've had some pressure from people to like endorse that party. I think endorsing any of these groups, in the face of a lack of a labor movement, the lack of kind of mass left activity more than every few years, like Black Lives Matter or Occupy, it pops up sporadically. You know, it is what it is. We're making it known to people. First of all, you don't need me to tell you, you can just go look up a group of U.S. left, socialist, communist, and left parties. You don't need me to, look that up, or you don't need me to hold your hand to figure that out. I'm always telling people, find out what's in your area and see if it's a fit. You can do that. Even if there was a party I really liked, I still probably wouldn't endorse them at this point. And that's also due to technical considerations, being that I'm a YouTube channel, and I think it's more strategically wise for me at this point to remain independent of a party. I have seen other channels get involved with parties, and then their output get throttled as a YouTube channel. So think of Danky Kang in particular, who joined PCUSA, and they tried to take over Danky Kang's channel, and it basically resulted in Danky Kang not getting anything published for like a year. I think probably it's more of an overall help for me to run the channel in a more general way, doing what I've been doing, and interacting with thousands of people that way. I think there's more benefit to that than endorsing a specific party at this point in time. So that's the calculation I made there. But anyway, American Party of Labor exists. ACB used to exist, does not currently, again, thanks to PCUSA suing them. Next line, you have some Maoist groups. There is the RCP, not to be confused with the Trotskyite RCA or RCI, but the RCP, these are the Avakians, Revolutionary Communist Party, and then the New African Black Panther Party, again, another Maoist. They're doing, I think, a lot of prison organizing. Those exist. I've mentioned before, this is an anti-revisionist channel, and I tend to lean more toward the Hoja side. I think there's some things about Mao, particularly the cult of Mao is one of the things that I don't like, is I've seen a lot of, when the Sino-Albanian split happened, there was so much ink wasted trying to defend Mao specifically from, that all the problems that were arising with the opening up and the post-1978 capitalism stuff, that was how dare you, say that Mao had anything to do with that. It's just who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? Mao obviously made contributions to the Chinese Revolution, and we read some of his writings, and they're important. But there comes a point where, look, in the 70s, it looks like he did start getting mixed up in some of that. And anyways, it's kind of ridiculous the extent to which I thought that a lot of the Maoists were attacking the Albanian criticisms was very much cult of personality around Mao kind of thing. It's such a non-starter for me. But anyway, the next group, you have CPUSA. This is kind of a group of, I didn't know else how to characterize these particular parties. They're not Maoist, they're not Hojaist, they're not Trotskyists. They claim to just be Marxist-Leninist parties. CPUSA, they'll tell you to vote Democrat. Freedom Road, and they uphold socialism with Chinese characteristics, so they're Dungus Chinese social imperialists. Freedom Road Socialist Organization, next to it, again, they uphold socialism with Chinese characteristics. Next, the Progressive Labor Party. There's a commenter or two affiliated with them, or who has been affiliated with them. I understand they actually did have kind of a bad line on Palestine, which they may have fixed later on. I haven't heard that much from them. They claim to be a revolutionary communist party of some kind. Again, I don't come across them in the wild that often, but I put them in this sort of category. Um, then you have, I'm actually not sure the name of this, but the website is Solidarity-US, and they're again a communist group that didn't appear to be specifically Maoist or Trotskyist or anything else. If you have any experience with that in the chat, please speak on it. Then you have the Socialist Labor Party, very old party going back to the 19th century, which is De Leonist, a bit niche, but there it is. And again, I know a couple of commenters who have read a lot from that party. The next group, Trotskyite and Trotskyite-derived parties. Freedom Socialist Party, Party for Socialism and Liberation, and a lot of people in that party seem to be under the impression it's a Marxist-Leninist party. PSL is a splinter off of the Workers' World Party, which is a Marxist party. It's an offshoot of U.S. Trotskyism. Now, I know a lot of people say that PSL is more kind of, mainline Marxist-Leninist. Again, the issue for me there is the upholding of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Very uncritical Chinese social imperialism, in my view. I'm frequently unimpressed with the things that I hear people from PSL say. I don't agree with them. I don't think they're doing Marxism-Leninism correctly. I think they're revisionist. And I did a video on that back in the fall. Socialist Alternative, Socialist Equality Party, Socialist Action, Socialist Workers' Party, and again, Workers' World Party. Now, all these parties have contributed something good at some point. Like, we're reading, I actually need to do another installment, got involved in a lot of other things, from Lavender and Red by Leslie Feinberg, who was associated with Workers' World Party. That's a great book. The organization is Marxist, so you're going to get Marxist takes on things, and there you have it. The next tier is things I guess I really don't look so highly on. So the APSP, this is Uhuru, and I put them in the same category as PCUSA. PCUSA being a splinter group off of CPUSA in I think like 2015 or so, 2016. And they purported to be anti-revisionist, but then quickly just became like a Nazbal Duganist party, kind of like a forerunner to today's A, quote, CP, and not a lot good to say. What's the issue with Uhuru? They had a whole kerfuffle a few years ago about, they got a little bit too involved in like...
Sorry, that's just crazy boring.
But pay little heed to the interests of others and different parties. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine too. What are these people after? They are after fame and position, and want to be in the limelight. Whenever they are put in charge of a branch of work, they assert their, quote, independence. With this aim, they draw some people in, push others out, and resort to boasting, flattery, and touting among the comrades, thus importing the vulgar style of the bourgeoisie political parties into the Communist Party. It is their dishonesty that causes them to come to grief. I believe we should do things honestly, for without an honest attitude it is absolutely impossible to accomplish anything in this world. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work. February 1st, 1942. Quote, they, communists, must grasp the principle of subordinating the needs of the part to the needs of the whole. If a proposal appears feasible for a partial situation but not for the situation as a whole, then the part must give way to the whole. Conversely, if the proposal is not feasible for the part but is feasible in the light of the situation as a whole, again, the part must give way to the whole. This is what is meant by considering the situation as a whole. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, pleasure seeking. In the Red Army, there are also quite a few people whose individualism finds expression in pleasure seeking. They always hope that their unit will march into big cities. They want to go there not to work, but to enjoy themselves. The last thing they want is to work in the red areas where life is hard. End quote. On correcting mistaken ideas in the party, December 1929. Quote, we must oppose the tendency towards selfish departmentalism, by which the interests of one's own unit are looked after to the exclusion of those of others. Whoever is indifferent to the difficulties of others refuses to transfer cadres to other units on request, or releases only the inferior ones, using the neighbor's field as an outlet for his overflow. It does not give the slightest consideration to other departments, localities, or people. Such a person is a selfish departmentalist who has entirely lost the spirit of communism. Lack of consideration for the whole and complete indifference to other departments, localities, and people are characteristics of a selfish departmentalist. We must intensify our efforts to educate such persons and to make them understand that selfish departmentalism is a sectarian tendency which will become very dangerous if allowed to develop. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work. February 1st, 1942. Quote, liberalism manifests itself in various ways. To let things slide for the sake of peace and friendship when a person has clearly gone wrong, and refrain from principled argument because he is an old acquaintance, a fellow townsman, a schoolmate, a close friend, a loved one, an old colleague or old subordinate. Or to touch on the matter lightly instead of going into it thoroughly, so as to keep on good terms. The result is that both the organization and the individual are harmed. This is one type of liberalism. To indulge in irresponsible criticism in private instead of actively putting forward one's suggestions to the organization. To say nothing to people to their faces, but to gossip behind their backs, or to say nothing at a meeting but to gossip afterwards. To show no regard at all for the principles of collective life, but to follow one's own inclination. This is a second type. To let things drift if they do not affect one personally. To say as little as possible while knowing perfectly well what is wrong. To be worldly wise and play safe and seek only to avoid blame. This is a third type. Not to obey orders, but to give pride of place to one's own opinions. To demand special consideration from the organizations, but to reject its discipline. This is a fourth type. To indulge in personal attacks, pick quarrels, vent personal spite or seek revenge instead of entering into an argument and struggling against incorrect views for the sake of unity or progress, or getting the work done properly. This is a fifth type. To hear incorrect views without rebutting them, and even to hear counter-revolutionary remarks without reporting them, but instead to take them calmly as if nothing had happened. This is a sixth type. To be among the masses and fail to conduct propaganda and agitation, or speak at meetings or conduct investigations and inquiries among them, and instead to be indifferent to them and show no concern for their well-being, forgetting that one is a communist and behaving as if one were an ordinary non-communist. This is a seventh type. To see someone harming the interests of the masses and yet not feel indignant, or dissuade or stop it, or reason with him, but to allow him to continue. This is an eighth type. To work half-heartedly without a definite plan or direction. To work perfunctorily and muddle along. So long as one remains a monk, one goes on tolling the bell. This is a ninth type. To regard oneself as having rendered great service to the revolution. To pride oneself on being a veteran. To disdain minor assignments while being quite unequal to major tasks. To be slipshod in work and slack in study. This is a 10th type. To be aware of one's own mistakes and yet make no attempt to correct them, taking a liberal attitude towards oneself. This is an 11th type. End quote. Combat Liberalism, September 7th, 1937. Quote, liberalism is extremely harmful in a revolutionary collective. It is a corrosive which eats away unity, undermines cohesion, causes apathy, and creates dissension. It robs the revolutionary ranks of compact organization and strict discipline, prevents policies from being carried through, and alienates the party organizations from the masses which the party leads. It is an extremely bad tendency. People who are liberals look upon the principles of Marxism as abstract dogma. They approve of Marxism, but are not prepared to practice it or to practice it in full. They are not prepared to replace their liberalism by Marxism. These people have their Marxism, but they have their liberalism as well. They talk Marxism but practice liberalism. They apply Marxism to others, but liberalism to themselves. They keep both kinds of good in stock and find a use for each. This is how the minds of certain people work. The people's state protects the people. Only when the people have such a state can they educate and remold themselves by democratic methods on a countrywide scale, with everything taking part, and shake off the influence of domestic and foreign reactionaries, which is still very strong, will survive for a long time, and cannot be quickly destroyed. Rid themselves of the bad habits and ideas acquired in the old society, not allow themselves to be led astray by the reactionaries, and continue to advance towards a socialist and communist society. End quote. On the People's Democratic Dictatorship, June 30th, 1949. Quote, "It is not hard for one to do a bit of good. What is hard is to do good all one's life and never do anything bad. To act consistently in the interests of the broad masses, the young people in the revolution, and to engage in arduous struggle for decades on end. That is the hardest thing of all." End quote. Message of greetings on the 60th birthday of Comrade Wu Yu Chang, January 15th, 1940. Chapter 25. Unity. Quote, "The unification of our country, the unity of our people, and the unity of our various nationalities. These are the basic guarantees of the sure triumph of our cause." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, "It is only through the unity of the Communist Party that the unity of the whole class and the whole nation can be achieved. And it is only through the unity of the whole class and the whole nation that the enemy can be defeated and the national and democratic revolution accomplished." End quote. Win the masses in their millions for the anti-Japanese National United Front, May 7th, 1937. Quote, "We shall solidly unite all the forces of our party on democratic, centralist principles of organization and discipline. We shall unite with any comrade if he abides by the party's program, constitution, and decisions." End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, "This democratic method of resolving contradictions among the people was epitomized in 1942 in the formula unity, criticism, unity. To elaborate, it means starting from the desire for unity, resolving contradictions through criticism or struggle, and arriving at a new unity on a new basis. In our experience, this is the correct method of resolving contradictions among the people." End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, "This, our army, has achieved remarkable unity in its own ranks and with those outside its ranks. Internally, there is unity between officers and men, between the higher and lower ranks, and between military work, political work, and rear service work. And externally, there is unity between the army and the people, between the army and government organizations, and between our army and the friendly armies. It is imperative to overcome anything that impairs this unity." End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Chapter 26. Discipline. Quote, "Within the ranks of the people, democracy is correlative with centralism and freedom with discipline. They are the two opposites of a single entity, contradictory as well as united, and we should not one-sidedly emphasize one to the denial of the other. Within the ranks of the people, we cannot do without freedom, nor can we do without discipline. We cannot do without democracy, nor we can do without centralism. This unity of democracy and centralism, of freedom and discipline, constitutes our democratic centralism. Under this system, the people enjoy extensive democracy and freedom, but at the same time they have to keep within the bounds of socialist discipline. End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people. February 27th, 1957. Quote, we must affirm anew the discipline of the party. Namely, 1. The individual is subordinate to the organization. 2. The minority is subordinate to the majority. 3. The lower level is subordinate to the higher level. And 4. The entire membership is subordinate to the Central Committee. Whoever violates these articles of discipline disrupts party unity. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War. October 1938. Quote, one requirement of party discipline is that the minority should submit to the majority. If the view of the minority has been rejected, it must support the decision passed by the majority. If necessary, it can bring up the matter for reconsideration at the next meeting. But apart from that, it must not act against the decision in any way. End quote. On correcting mistaken ideas in the party. December 1929. Quote, the 3 main rules of discipline are as follows. 1. Obey orders in all your actions. 2. Do not take a single needle or piece of thread from the masses. 3. Turn in everything captured. The 8 points for attention are as follows. 1. Speak politely. 2. Pay fairly for what you buy. 3. Return everything you borrow. 4. Pay for anything you damage. 5. Do not hit or swear at people. 6. Do not damage crops. 7. Do not take liberties with women. 8. Do not ill-treat captives. End quote. On the reissue of the 3 main rules of discipline and the 8 points for attention. Instruction of the General Headquarters of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. October 10th, 1947. Quote, they, all officers and soldiers of our army, must heighten their sense of discipline and resolutely carry out orders, carry out our policy, carry out the 3 main rules of discipline and the 8 points for attention. With army and people united, army and government united, officers and soldiers united, and the whole army united, and permit no breach of discipline. End quote. Manifesto of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, October 1947. Chapter 27. Criticism and Self-Criticism. Quote, the Communist Party does not fear criticism because we are Marxists. The truth is on our side, and the basic masses, the workers and peasants, are on our side. End quote. Speech at the Chinese Communist Party's National Conference on Propaganda Work, March 12, 1957. Quote, thoroughgoing materialists are fearless. We hope that all our fellow fighters will courageously shoulder their responsibilities and overcome all difficulties, fearing no setbacks or gibes, nor hesitating to criticize us communists and give us their suggestions. He who is not afraid of death by 1,000 cuts dares to unhorse the emperor. This is the indomitable spirit needed in our struggle to build socialism and communism. We have the Marxist-Leninist weapon of criticism and self-criticism. We can get rid of a bad style and keep the good. End quote. Report to the second plenary session of the 7th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, March 5th, 1949. Quote, conscientious practice of self-criticism is still another hallmark distinguishing our party from all other political parties. As we say, dust will accumulate if a room is not cleaned regularly. Our faces will get dirty if they are not washed regularly. Our comrades' minds and our party's work may also collect dust, and also need sweeping and washing. The proverb, running water is never stale, and a door hinge is never warm-eaten, means that constant motion prevents the inroads of germs and other organisms. To check up regularly on our work, and in the process, develop a democratic style of work to fear neither criticism nor self-criticism, and to apply such good popular Chinese maxims as, say all you know and say it without reserve. Blame not the speaker, but be warned by his words. And correct mistakes if you have committed them, and guard against them if you have not. This is the only effective way to prevent all kinds of political dust and germs from contaminating the minds of our comrades and the body of our party. End quote. on Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, opposition and struggle between ideas of different kinds constantly occur within the party. This is a reflection within the party of contradictions between classes and between the new and the old in society. If there were no contradictions in the party and no ideological struggles to resolve them, the party's life would come to an end. End quote. On contradiction, August 1937. Quote, we stand for active ideological struggle because it is the weapon for ensuring unity within the party and the revolutionary organizations in the interest of our fight. Every communist and revolutionary should take up this weapon, but liberalism rejects ideological struggle and stands for unprincipled peace, thus giving rise to a decadent, Philistine attitude and bringing about political degeneration in certain units and individuals in the party and the revolutionary organizations. End quote. Combat Liberalism, September 7th, 1937. Quote, in opposing subjectivism, sectarianism, and stereotyped party writing, we must have in mind two purposes. First, learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. And second, cure the sickness to save the patient. The mistakes of the past must be exposed without sparing anyone's sensibilities. It is necessary to analyze and criticize what was bad in the past with a scientific attitude so that work in the future will be done more carefully and done better. This is what is meant by learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones. But our aim in exposing errors and criticizing shortcomings, like that of a doctor curing a sickness, is solely to save the patient and not to doctor him to death. A person with appendicitis is saved when the surgeon removes his appendix. So long as a person who has made mistakes does not hide his sickness for fear of treatment, or persist in his mistakes until he's beyond cure. So long as he honestly and sincerely wishes to be cured and amend his ways, we should welcome him and cure his sickness, so that he can become a good comrade. We can never succeed if we just let ourselves go and lash out at him. In treating an ideological or a political malady, one must never be rough and rash, but must adopt the approach of curing the sickness to save the patient, which is the only correct and effective method. End quote. Rectify the party's style of work, February 1st, 1942. Quote, another point that should be mentioned in connection with inter-party criticism is that some comrades ignore the major issues and confine their attention to minor points when they make their criticism. They do not understand that the main task of criticism is to point out political and organizational mistakes. As to personal shortcomings, unless they are related to political and organizational mistakes, there is no need to be overcritical, or the comrades concerned will be at a loss as to what to do. Moreover, once such criticism develops, there is the great danger that within the party, attention will be concentrated exclusively on minor faults, and everyone will become timid and overcautious and forget the party's political tasks. End quote. On correcting mistaken ideas in the party, December 1929. Quote, in inter-party criticism, guard against subjectivism, arbitrariness, and the vulgarization of criticism. Statements should be based on facts, and criticism should stress the political side. Inter-party criticism is a weapon for strengthening the party organization and increasing its fighting capacity. In the party organization of the Red Army, however, criticism is not always of this character, and sometimes turns into personal attack. As a result, it damages the party organization as well as individuals. This is a manifestation of petty bourgeoisie individualism. The method of correction is to help party members understand that the purpose of criticism is to increase the party's fighting capacity in order to achieve victory in the class struggle, and that it should not be used as a means of personal attack. If we have shortcomings, we are not afraid to have them pointed out and criticized, because we serve the people. Anyone, no matter who, may point out our shortcomings. If he is right, we will correct them. If what he proposes will benefit the people, we will act upon it. End quote. Serve the people, September 8th, 1944. Quote, as we Chinese communists, who base all our actions on the highest interests of the broadest masses of the Chinese people, and who are fully convinced of the justice of our cause, never balk at any personal sacrifice and are ready at all times to give our lives for the cause. Can we be reluctant to discard any idea, viewpoint, opinion, or method which is not suited to the needs of the people? Can we be willing to allow political dust and germs to dirty our clean faces or eat into our healthy organisms? Countless revolutionary martyrs have laid down their lives in the interests of the people, and our hearts are filled with pain as we the living think of them. Can there be any personal interest, then, that we would not sacrifice, or any error that we would not discard? End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, "We must not become complacent over any success. We should check our complacency and constantly criticize our shortcomings, just as we would wash our faces or sweep the floor every day to remove the dirt and keep them clean." End quote. Get organized, November 29th, 1943. Quote, "As for criticism, do it in good time. Don't get into the habit of criticizing only after the event." End quote. On the question of agricultural cooperation, July 31st, 1955. Quote, "Taught by mistakes and setbacks, we have become wiser and handle our affairs better. It is hard for any political party or person to avoid mistakes, but we should make as few as possible. Once a mistake is made, we should correct it, and the more quickly and thoroughly, the better." End quote. On the People's Democratic Dictatorship, June 30th, 1949. Chapter 28. Communists. Quote, "A communist should have a largeness of mind, and he should be staunch and active, looking upon the interests of the revolution as his very life, and subordinating his personal interests to those of the revolution. Always and everywhere, he should adhere to the principle and wage a tireless struggle against all incorrect ideas and actions, so as to consolidate the collective life of the party and strengthen the ties between the party and the masses. He should be more concerned about the party and the masses than about any individual, and more concerned about others than about himself. Only thus can he be considered a communist." End quote. Combat Liberalism, September 7th, 1937. Quote, "Every comrade must be brought to understand that the supreme test of the words and deeds of a communist is whether they conform with the highest interests and enjoy the support of the overwhelming majority of the people." End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, "At no time and in no circumstances should a communist place his personal interests first. He should subordinate them to the interests of the nation and of the masses. Hence, selfishness, slacking, corruption, seeking the limelight, and so on, are most contemptible, while selflessness, working with all one's energy, wholehearted devotion to public duty, and quiet hard work will command respect." End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, "Communists must be ready at all times to stand up for the truth, because truth is in the interests of the people. Communists must be ready at all times to correct their mistakes, because mistakes are against the interests of the people." End quote. On Coalition Government, April 24th, 1945. Quote, "Communists must always go into the whys and wherefores of anything, use their own heads, and carefully think over whether or not it corresponds to reality and is really well founded. On no account should they follow blindly and encourage slavishness." End quote. Rectify the party's style of work, February 1st, 1942. Quote, "We should encourage comrades to take the interests of the whole into account. Every party member, every branch of work, every statement, and every action must proceed from the interests of the whole party. It is absolutely impermissible to violate this principle. Communists should set an example in being practical as well as far-sighted, for only by being practical can they fulfill the appointed tasks, and only far-sightedness can prevent them from losing their bearings in the march forward." End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, "Communists should be the most far-sighted, the most self-sacrificing, the most resolute, and the least prejudiced in sizing up situations, and should rely on the majority of the masses and win their support." End quote. The tasks of the Chinese Communist Party in the period of resistance to Japan, May 3rd, 1937. Quote, communists should set an example in study. At all times, they should be pupils of the masses as well as their teachers. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, every communist working in the mass movements should be a friend of the masses and not a boss over them, an indefatigable teacher and not a bureaucratic politician. Communists must never separate themselves from the majority of the people or neglect them by leading only a few progressive contingents in an isolated and rash advance, but must take care to forge close links between the progressive elements and the broad masses. This is what is meant by thinking in terms of the majority. We communists are like seeds, and the people are like the soil. Wherever we go, we must unite with the people, take root, and blossom among them. End quote. On the Chungking negotiations, October 17th, 1945. Quote, we communists must be able to integrate ourselves with the masses in all things. If our party members spend their whole lives sitting indoors and never go out to face the world and brave the storm, what good will they be to the Chinese people? None at all, and we do not need such people as party members. We communists ought to face the world and brave the storm, the great world of mass struggle and the mighty storm of mass struggle. End quote. Get organized, November 29th, 1943. Quote, the exemplary vanguard role of the communists is of vital importance. Communists in the 8th Route and new 4th Armies should set an example in fighting bravely, carrying out orders, observing discipline, doing political work, and fostering internal unity and solidarity. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, a communist must never be opinionated or domineering, thinking that he is good in everything while others are good in nothing. He must never shut himself up in his little room, or brag and boast and lord it over others. End quote. Speech at the Assembly of Representatives of the Shensi Kansu-Nija Border Region, November 21st, 1941. Quote, communists must never listen attentively to the views of people outside the party and let them have their say. If what they say is right, we ought to welcome it, and we should learn from their strong points. If it is wrong, we should let them finish what they are saying and then patiently explain things to them. The attitude of communists towards any person who has made mistakes in his work should be one of persuasion, in order to help him change and start afresh, and not one of exclusion, unless he is incorrigible. End quote. The role of the Chinese Communist Party in the National War, October 1938. Quote, as for people who are politically backward, communists should not slight or despise them, but should befriend them, unite with them, convince them, and encourage them to go forward. End quote. If you'd like to contribute or learn more about our party, visit www.t.me/ the future of the motherland and the ideals of mankind. It seems as if Marxism was once all the rage, but is currently not so much in fashion. To counter these tendencies, we must strengthen our ideological and political work. Both students and intellectuals should study hard. In addition to the study of their specialized subjects, they must make progress both ideologically and politically, which means that they should study Marxism-Leninism, current events, and politics. Not to have a correct political point of view is like having no soul. All departments and organizations should shoulder their responsibilities in ideological and political work. This applies to the Communist Party, the Youth League, government departments in charge of this work, and especially to heads of educational institutions and teachers. End quote. On the correct handling of contradictions among the people, February 27th, 1957. Quote, after receiving political education, the Red Army soldiers have all become class conscious and learned the essentials of distributing land, setting up political power, arming the workers and peasants, etc. And they all know they are fighting for themselves, for the working class and the peasantry. Hence, they can endure the hardships of the bitter struggle without complaint. Each company, battalion, or regiment has its soldiers' committee, which represents the interests of the soldiers, carries on political and mass work. End quote. The Struggle in the Qingkang Mountains, November 25th, 1928. Quote, the correct unfolding of the movement for pouring out grievances, the wrongs done to the laboring people by the old society and by the reactionaries, and the three checkups on class origin, performance of duty, and will to fight, greatly heightened the political consciousness of commanders and fighters throughout the army in the fight for the emancipation of the exploited working masses, for nationwide land reform, and for the destruction of the common enemy of the people, the Chiang Kai-shek bandit gang. It also greatly strengthened the firm unity of all commanders and fighters under the leadership of the Communist Party. On this basis, the army achieved greater purity in its ranks, strengthened discipline, unfolded a mass movement for training, and further developed its political, economic, and military democracy in a completely well-led and orderly way. Thus, the army has become united as one man, with everybody contributing his ideas and his strength. An army fearless of sacrifice and capable of overcoming material difficulties, which displays mass heroism and daring in destroying the enemy. Such an army will be invincible. End quote. On the great victory in the Northwest and on the new type of ideological education movement in the Liberation Army. March 7th, 1948. Quote, in the last few months, almost all the People's Liberation Army has made use of the intervals between battles for large-scale training and consolidation. This has been carried out in a fully guided, orderly, and democratic way. It has therefore aroused the revolutionary fervor of the great masses of commanders and fighters, enabled them clearly to comprehend the aim of the war, eliminated certain incorrect ideological tendencies and undesirable manifestations in the army, educated the cadres and fighters, and greatly enhanced the combat effectiveness of the army. From now on, we must continue to carry on this new type of ideological education movement in the army, a movement which has a democratic and mass character. End quote. Speech at a conference of cadres in the Shanxi Soyan liberated area, April 1st, 1948. Quote, the educational policy of the college, the anti-Japanese military and political college, is to cultivate a firm and correct political orientation, an industrious and simple style of work, and flexible strategy and tactics. These are the three essentials in the making of an anti-Japanese revolutionary soldier. It is in accordance with these essentials that the staff teach and the students study. End quote. To be attacked by the enemy is not a bad thing, but a good thing. May 26, 1939. Quote, our nation has always had a traditional style of hard struggle, which we should develop. What is more, the Communist Party has always advocated a firm and correct political orientation. This orientation is inseparable from a style of hard struggle. Without a firm and correct political orientation, it is impossible to promote a style of hard struggle. Without the style of hard struggle, it is impossible to maintain a firm and correct political orientation. End quote. Speech at the Yunnan rally in celebration of International Labor Day, May 1st, 1939. Quote, be united, alert, earnest, and lively. End quote. Motto for the anti-Japanese military and political college. Quote, what really counts in the world is conscientiousness, and the Communist Party is most particular about being conscientious. End quote. Talk at a meeting with Chinese students and trainees in Moscow, November 17, 1957. Chapter 13. Relations between officers and men. Quote, our army has always had two policies. First, we must be ruthless to our enemies. We must overpower and annihilate them. Second, we must be kind to our own, to the people, to our comrades and to our superiors and subordinates, and unite with them. End quote. Speech at the reception given by the Central Committee of the Party for Model Study Delegates from the Rear Army Detachments, September 18, 1944. Quote, we hail from all corners of the country and have joined together for a common revolutionary objective. Our cadres must show concern for every soldier, and all people in the revolutionary ranks must care for each other, must love and help each other. End quote. Serve the people. September 8th, 1944. Quote, A movement to support the cadres and cherish the soldiers should be launched in every Army unit, calling on the cadres to cherish the soldiers and the soldiers to support the cadres. They should speak up about each other's shortcomings and mistakes and quickly correct them. In this way, they will be able to achieve a very good internal unity. End quote. The tasks for 1945, December 15th.